everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. It's time for another episode of Rock and Read. Today I want to start a new book. It's called It's So Easy Breezy Beautiful Cover Girl. No, it's really called It's So Easy and Otherwise by Guns N' Roses bassist Duff McKagan. I'm so excited to see how this book unfolds. Let's get started. Chapter 1. I've known a lot of junkies. Many of these addicts have either died or continued to live a pitiful existence to this day. With many of these same people, I personally witnessed a wonderful lust for life as we played music together as kids and looked toward the future. Of course, no one sets out to be a junkie or alcoholic. Some people can experiment in their youth and move on. Others cannot. When Guns N' Roses began to break into the public consciousness, I was known as a big drinker. In 1988, MTV aired a concert in which Axl introduced me, as usual, Duff, the king of beers, McKagan. Soon after this, a production company working on a new animated series called me to ask if they could use the name Duff for a brand of beer in the show. I laughed and said, "Of course, no problem." The whole thing sounded like a low-rent art project or something. I mean, who made cartoons for adults? Little did I know that the show would become The Simpsons, and that within a few years I would start to see Duff beer glasses and gear everywhere we toured. Still, given what I'd seen, a reputation for drinking didn't seem like a big deal. But by the time Guns N' Roses spent 28 months from 1991 to 1993 touring the Use Your Illusion albums, my intake had reached epic proportions. For the Round the World Illusion tour, Guns leased a private plane. It wasn't an executive jet. It was a full-on 727 we leased from MGM casinos with lounges and individual bedroom suites for the band members. Slash and I christened the plane on our maiden journey by smoking crack together, before the wheels had left the ground. Not something I recommend, incidentally. The smell gets into everything. I don't even remember playing Czechoslovakia. We played a stadium show in one of the most beautiful cities in East Europe not long after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the only way I knew I had even been in the country was because of the stamp I found in my passport. It wasn't clear anymore whether or not I would be one of those who could experiment in his youth and move on. Every day I made sure I had a vodka bottle sitting next to my bed when I woke up. I tried to quit drinking in 1992, but started again with a vengeance after only a few weeks. I just could not stop. I was too far gone. My hair began falling out in clumps and my kidneys ached when I peed. My body couldn't take the full assault of the alcohol without back at me. My septum had burned through from coke and my nose ran continuously like a leaky faucet in a neglected men's room urinal. The skin on my hands and feet cracked. I had boils on my face and neck. I had to wear bandages under my gloves in order to be able to play my bass. There are many different ways to come out of a funk like that. Some people go straight to rehab, some go to church, others go to AA, and many more end up in a pine box, which is where I felt I was headed. By early 1993, my cocaine use had gotten so bad that friends, some of whom did blow or smoke crack with me, actually started tentatively talking to me about it and trying their best to keep my dealers out of my life when I arrived back home for a break between legs of the tour. But I had my ways to circumvent all the do-gooders. There was always a way in L.A. One of the lies that I told myself was that I wasn't really a cocaine addict. After all, I didn't go to coke parties and never did cocaine by itself. As a matter of fact, I hated the idea that I was doing coke. My use was strictly utilitarian. I used its stimulant effects to stave off drunkenness and to allow me to drink for much longer, often days on end. Actually, mostly days on end. Because I was adamant about not becoming the stereotypical coke guy, I didn't have any of the fancy grinders that make coke a lot easier to snort. I would just get my package, open it, break a rock into a few smaller pieces in a half-assed way, and shove one of the pieces up my nose. Of course, I could tell that my primitive process was taking a toll. The inside of my nose was always on fire. Sometimes it flared so badly that I would double over in pain. Then, the wife of my main coke dealer, Josh, got pregnant. I started to worry that she had not given up her own coke habit. One thing that never seeped from my otherwise porous ethical system. Almost anything could be deemed fun and games when it was your life and your life alone that you were toying with, but endangering someone else was unacceptable. I was not going to participate in any situation where an innocent third party was being harmed. This was not just basic human decency. I came from a huge family, and by this point in my life I had something like 23 nephews and nieces, all of whom I had known since they were infants. No, I was going to put my foot down here with Josh and his wife Yvette, and insist that she quit. I didn't yet have the capacity to lead by example, but I did offer to pay for her to go to rehab. Both Josh and Yvette swore to me that, geez, of course she had stopped, and there was absolutely no way she would do that while the baby was in utero. I was suspicious. One weekend they came to stay with me and some other friends at a cabin I had bought on Lake Arrowhead, up in the mountains east of L.A. Josh, of course, had brought drugs, and I had given him and Yvette one of the downstairs bedrooms. I could tell Yvette was high. To check on my suspicions, I quietly entered their downstairs bedroom and found her bent over, snorting a line of coke. Seeing this for myself made me realize that I had sunk to an all-time low in my life. I lost it. I kicked them out of my house and told them that I never wanted to see them again. I was seething at them and at myself. I quit coke that day and drank myself through 2 brutal weeks of serious depression. Even though the effects of my drinking were more noticeable without the coke, drinking proved harder to rein in, much less kick. These days, I know what having the DTs actually means. The clinical definition of delirium tremens is a severe psychotic condition occurring in some persons with chronic alcoholism, characterized by uncontrollable trembling, vivid hallucinations, severe anxiety, sweating, and sudden feelings of terror. All I knew was that it wasn't cool. I felt really sick. My body was falling apart so badly that it looked like I was getting radiation treatment. Throughout the Use Your Illusion tour, I had recorded songs on my own, ducking into studios here and there. This project had served largely as a way to kill time I would otherwise have spent drinking, and I didn't know what the demos were for, really. One of them, my version of Johnny Thunder's You Can't Put Your Arms Around a Memory, ended up on GNR's Spaghetti Incident, the album of cover songs issued just after the end of the Use Your Illusion tour. I played a bit of everything over the course of the sessions, drum, guitar, bass. I sang too, and if you listen to the album, it's clear I wasn't able to breathe through my nose on some songs. Then at some point during the tour, a record label employee who was out on the road with us asked where I kept disappearing to on my off days. I told him. When Tom Zutaunt, who'd signed Guns to Geffen Records, caught wind of the demos, he asked me if I would like a solo deal. Geffen, he said, could release the tracks as an album. I knew he was probably being mercenary about it. By this time, Nirvana and Pearl Jam had broken, and Zutaunt probably figured leveraging my Seattle roots and punk connections could help the label reposition GNR. But I didn't care. To me, it was a chance to realize a dream. I'd grown up idolizing Prince, who played over 20 instruments on his debut album, which featured the amazing credit line, written, composed, performed, and recorded by Prince. Cool, my own record done the way Prince did it. Largely on my own, getting distributed around the world. Geffen rushed it out as Believe in Me in the summer of 1993, just as the Illusion tour was wrapping. Axl talked it up on stage during the last few gigs, and I even started to promote it while Guns was still in Europe. At a signing in Spain, so many people showed up that the street outside the record store had to be shut down by police in riot gear. I had scheduled a solo tour that would start immediately after GNR's last shows, 2 final gigs in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in July 1993. My solo tour would send me first to play showcases in San Francisco, LA, and New York, and then to open the Scorpions Arena tour around Europe and the UK. Returning to LA from Argentina, I joined the group of friends and acquaintances I arranged to back me on the tour. They had already started rehearsing before I got home. Together we did whirlwind preparations for the tour. Axl heard I was planning to go back out on tour. He called me. "Are you crazy? You should not go back out on the road right now. You are insane even to think about it." "It's the only thing I know how to do," I told him. "I play music." I also knew that if I stayed at home, it would probably devolve into more drug insanity. I didn't have any illusions about getting sober, but at least out on the road, with a band made up of old Seattle punk rock friends, I figured I had some chance of toning things down. And of staying off coke. If I stayed in LA, the temptation of readily available cocaine would likely be too much for me to resist. GNR management sent Rick Truck Beeman, who had served as my personal security guard on the Use Your Illusion tour, out on the road for my solo tour too. By this stage, his concern for me seemed to extend beyond his professional duties. He had taken a deep personal interest, as a friend, in trying to limit the damage I was doing to myself. Now, finally, our goal had dovetailed, at least as far as cocaine was concerned. But Axel was right. Before the first gig in San Francisco, my then-wife Linda got into a fistfight backstage with another girl and lost a tooth. Blood spattered everywhere. Hell's Angels packed the show at Webster Hall in New York, and brawls broke out. I shouted at the crowd to settle down, thinking I could somehow make a difference. After the show, people tried to come backstage, but I wanted to be alone. I'm too tired, I told security. I just can't take it. Lyrics from Just Not There, one of the Believe in Me songs we were performing, reverberated in my head. You know I look, but I just can't find the reasons to face another day, 'cause I feel like crawling up inside, just fading away, fading away. I toured the record as planned until December 1993. There was still a fervor for all things Guns, especially in Europe. Audiences knew my songs and sang along. With the exception of keyboardist Teddy Andreadis, who had been out with Guns for Use Your Illusion, and who had been touring with artists like Carole King since he was barely out of his teens, the band members were fairly inexperienced with arena-scale touring. The band had also been thrown together quickly and lacked cohesion. We had some rough patches, including an intra-band fistfight at an airport somewhere in Europe. For the most part, I did stay off coke, though it was by no means a clean break. There were slip-ups. I also switched from drinking vodka to wine. Downshifting to wine was all well and good, but the volume of wine quickly skyrocketed until I was drinking 10 bottles a day. I was getting really bad heartburn from all the wine, taking Tums all the time. I wasn't eating, but I was badly bloated. My body felt awful. At the end of the European leg, our lead guitar player pulled a knife on our bus driver in England. I had to fire him. Luckily, the tour was finished. Back in Los Angeles, I called Paul Soldier, an old friend I had played together with as a teenager in Seattle, and asked him to fill in for the next part of the tour. Soldier had gotten sober in the 10 years since I had last played with him. Needless to say, I had not. Still, he agreed. My band and I headed to Japan in early 1994. Over there, we crossed paths with the Posies, a veteran jangle pop band from Seattle. They came to our gig and said they thought it was cool that the new version of my band was sort of a Seattle punk rock all-star band. Good to know. I was still Seattle. After Japan, we had a few weeks off. I returned to LA before the next leg of the tour in Australia. Back home, I felt as sick as I ever had. My hands and feet were bleeding. I had constant nosebleeds. I was blood. Sores on my skin oozed. My LA house was awash in the fetid effluvia of my derelict body. I found myself picking up the phone to tell my managers and band that we weren't going to Australia. I had bought a house back home in Seattle at that point, a dream house, right on Lake Washington, and I could feel its pull. I had bought it a few years before, sight unseen, in a neighborhood where I had used to go to steal cars and boats when I was a kid. In the interim, I had barely had a chance to spend any time there because of the endless Use Your Illusion tour. I thought it might be the right place to try to recover, relax, and recharge. On March 31st, 1994, I went to LAX to catch a flight from LA to Seattle. Kurt Cobain was waiting to take the same flight. We started talking. He had just skipped out of a rehab facility. We were both up. We ended up getting seats next to each other and talking the whole way, but we didn't delve into certain things. I was in my hell and he was in his, and we both seemed to understand. When we arrived in Seattle and went toward baggage claim, the thought crossed my mind to invite him over to my place. I had a sense that he was lonely and alone that night. So was I. But there was a mad rush of people in the terminal. I was in a big rock band. He was in a big rock band. We cowered next to each other as people gawked. Lots of people. I lost my train of thought for a minute, and Kurt slipped out into a waiting limo. Arriving in front of my house in Seattle, I stopped in the driveway and looked up at the roof. When I had bought the place, it had been old and leaky, and I had paid to have the cedar shakes replaced. The new roof was rated to last 25 years, and looking up at it now, I thought it was funny. The roof would surely outlast me. Still, staying in the house gave me the feeling that I had finally made it, able to live in a place like this and a part of town like this. A few days later, my manager called to tell me Kurt Cobain had been found dead at his Seattle house after putting a gun to his own head. I'm embarrassed to say that upon hearing the news, I just felt numb. People in my band had overdosed multiple times. My own addictions had spun out of control and my body was failing. I didn't pick up the phone and call Kurt's bandmates Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic. I figured my condolences would be meaningless anyway. A few years prior, I had gotten into a scrap with Chris backstage at the MTV Awards, where Guns and Nirvana had both performed. I lost my when I thought I heard a slight of my band from the Nirvana camp. In my drunken haze, I went after Chris. My means of dealing with any sort of conflict had been reduced to barroom brawling by them. Jim Warnick from the Fastbacks, the first real band I played with as a kid in Seattle, had called me the day after the award show and scolded me. I had felt so low. Now I felt lower still, staring at the phone, incapable of calling to apologize for the earlier incident and to extend my sympathy for his loss and Dave's. Not that Kurt's death made any difference in how I dealt with my own funk. I just didn't deal at all. Until 1 month later. Even after GNR became widely successful and my world spun out of control, my three closest friends from childhood, Andy, Eddie, and Brian, would still call and come down to LA. By the time the tour was winding down, I didn't want them to see too much. I was playing a game by then, but they saw the pictures in the magazines and the interviews on MTV, and I'd call them on my phone all the time. I called them up too many times, too late at night. I probably called Andy every second day while I was out on the road. He would defend me back in Seattle. He would tell people they didn't know what my life was like, what I was going through. He was protective, but I knew he was going to have a talk with me, the one my mom couldn't have. I knew now that I was off the road. It was just a matter of time. That either I was going to die or Andy was going to give me the talk. I didn't know what I was going to do when we had the talk. I went to sleep on May 9th, 1994 with those thoughts in my head, albeit garbled by the 10 bottles of wine I had consumed that day. The morning of May 10th, I woke up in my new bed with sharp pains in my stomach. Pain was nothing new to me, nor was the sickening feeling of things going wrong with my body, but this was different. The pain was unimaginable, like someone taking a dull knife and twisting it into my gut. The pain was so intense I couldn't even make it to the edge of the bed to dial 911. I was frozen in pain and fear, whimpering. There I was, naked on my bed in my dream house, a home I had bought with the hopes of one day having a family of my own to fill it. I lay there for what felt like an eternity. The silence of the empty house seemed as loud as my raspy, muffled moans. Never before in my life had I wanted someone to kill me, but I was in such pain I just hoped to be put out of my misery. Then I heard Andy, my best friend from childhood, come in the back door. He called, "Hey, what's up?" Just as he had ever since we were kids. "Andy, I'm upstairs," I wanted to answer, but I wasn't able to. I could only silently sob. I heard him start up the stairs. He must have seen my wallet in the kitchen. He made it upstairs and came down the hall. "Oh, it's finally happened," he said when he reached my room. I was thankful to have my friend there. It was comforting to think that I would die in front of Andy, but he had other ideas. He pulled some sweats on me and began to try to move me. He must have felt a jolt of adrenaline. Otherwise, there is no way Andy could have carried the 200 pounds of dead weight of my bloated body. As he carried me down the stairs and out to his car, the searing, stabbing pain in my intestines spread further down to my quadriceps and around to my lower back. I wanted to die. The doctor I'd had since I was a kid lived just 2 blocks away, so Andy took me there. Though Dr. Brad Thomas was my longtime physician, I hadn't let him see me very often once I had descended into full-blown alcoholism. Together, Andy and Dr. Thomas carried me to its first-floor office. I heard my condition being discussed, and I felt the prick of a needle in my butt. Demerol, nothing. Another shot of Demerol in my butt, and again, nothing. No relief whatsoever. One more shot. Again, nothing. The pain kept on spreading, and I was starting to panic. I whimpered as my spirit began to blacken and fade. They decided to rush me to the emergency room at Northwest Hospital. Dr. Thomas told Andy to drive me, as it would be faster than waiting for an ambulance. He said he would meet us there. Andy drove us as fast as he could without jerking the car too much. Every little movement made me moan and cry. As they put an IV drip of morphine into my left arm at the hospital, the staff asked me questions I could not answer. Name? Address? Andy answered those. How much do you drink on a daily basis? Are you on drugs right now? I just whimpered. I was mute from pain. The morphine wasn't working as I knew it should. I knew a thing or two about opiates by that stage of my life. I knew the warm rush they offered, yet I was getting none of it. They wheeled me into a room next to another guy on a gurney. The motion made me writhe in agony. "Dude, I broke my back," said the guy in the other bed, "and I'm glad I don't have whatever you have." Dr. Thomas and an ultrasound technician ran a scanner over my organs, and I saw my doctor's face go white. My pancreas, apparently swollen to the size of a football from all the booze, had burst. I had third-degree burns all over the inside of my body from the digestive enzymes released by my damaged pancreas. Only a few parts of the inside of your digestive tract can handle the enzymes, and the outside of your organs and your stomach muscles are definitely not among them. It just burns all that tissue. A surgeon with thick glasses explained the surgery. They had to take out the top part of the pancreas, cut it off, sew me back up, and then I'd have to be on dialysis for the rest of my life. Suddenly, I understood the pleading mouthed by miserable souls back to antiquity, those left breathing after being run through with a rusty sword or scalded with hot oil. I was there. I summoned all my power to whisper to the ER doctor, "Kill me." I begged over and over, "Please, kill me. Just kill me, please." What an emotional first chapter. Let me know what you guys thought of chapter 1 in the comments. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.